Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guests introduce themselves before we introduce the topic. So we're going to go in alphabetical order because I can do the alphabet. I know the letters, people. We've got Miss Jenny J.F. Posthumous.
I am J.F. Posthumous. I write fantasy, sci-fi, pretty much it. I'm not sure what all to say.
Hello, works. So next,
reigning queen of three ravens. Order, you could add that.
We've got the Zoom Mr.
Reigning queen of three ravens. You could add that.
The other Jenny might complain. I don't know.
I was actually there before her.
Well, I doubt you're a genius then, I guess. Next in alphabetical order, we got the Zoomy extraordinaire, Mr. Josh Hayes.
Hey, thanks. I'm Josh Hayes. I'm the operations manager for Athon Books, and I am a science fiction and fantasy author that's going very quickly to be moving into contemporary military thrillers.
So, operations manager sounds so corporate. So last year, you need something like, I don't know, the king of schedules. I don't know, the monarch of calendars. I don't know. You got to come up with something better, I think.
I like the king of Athon land. I'll use that. The king of Athon land.
Scheduling. Brad, he won't even notice. He's too busy writing.
Yeah.
So that works. All right. And because I can do the alphabet, people, I'm going to prove it tonight. We got Mr. Michael LaVoice.
Oh. Hey. Yeah, I'm Michael LaVoice, author of Galaxy's Most Wanted, currently available from Athon. Speaking of, and I write basically space opera with a sometime military sci-fi twist to it. That's me.
All right, and next we got Mr. Scott Moon.
Oh God, I'm Scott Moon. I write science fiction, primarily space opera and that sort of thing. I think my favorite series is probably The Last Reaper, but there's many others. My webpage is scottmoonwriter.com if you want to see a list of, I think, 58 books now. So
because sleep is for the weak.
I slam them out.
Sleep is for the weak. And if you don't notice, he probably also plays instruments based on the guitar behind him in the sheet.
I do. I play some bass and guitar and whatnot. I got a bunch of stories about that. If we get some dead air, I'll digress.
I just think we need to make an author band because I do vocals and harmonica, and I know Steve plays stuff. So we need to do
rock out.
I can do a mad beatbox.
Yeah, can you mime with it, like as you do the beatbox?
Oh, for sure.
Outstanding. All right, and last but not least, we have Mr. Steve Diamond.
Hey guys, good to be with you again. Steve Diamond. Write horror fantasy. And not horror fantasy. Well, I mean, yeah, but
sure.
Horror, fantasy, science fiction, and some techno thrillers. Bane by myself. Recently signed a deal with Athon, so doing all that stuff. And then my side gig, which is hopefully going to become my permanent gig, is doing special editions, super high-end special editions under Diamond Editions. And so there's a few of those coming out soon. That's nice.
Me. And,
I'm fairly confident I picked up the Sun Eater, the one you did with Christopher.
Chris. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you did.
I think I got one.
No, I'm pretty sure you did. If not, maybe I can still get you in.
Steve's also what we used to call a literary whore. He's recovering though because he used to say yes to any short story anthology that I sent his way, and now he's like, "JR, I've got schedules. I mean, can you talk to me in 2027?"
I know. So last year I was gainfully unemployed for a while, which was wonderful, and so I was like, "Yes, I'll write everything," and I did, and then I had that. I heard that health insurance was important, and so I got it and started working again. And as such, I think I have one short story that I'm under contract to write, and that's it. So
Yeah.
Nice. So you had the only one who took horror for the Santa as a Badass anthology we did. You're the only one who put a horror spin on it, which I still is
Yeah,
one of my
baby.
favorites. It's good.
That's right.
I remember the editor was like, "Does this guy need to talk to somebody?" I mean, like, I might know a guy.
I get that a lot.
Right, what you know. I mean, what?
So I write torture scenes.
You know, Judge. I would tell you where we met all of them, but mostly just in the indie writer community, they're there. Although Steve, and Josh, they all went hybrid and started publishing for other people.
Yeah.
It happens, business. So we'll move on to the religion question. And this is a new one. None of you have answered before, but it's germane to the topic. So RoboCop, Time Cop, or Judge Dredd? We're just going to go on alpha or bottom around. So we're going to go with Stabby first because she's always last. I know.
Me?
Yes, you.
Oh.
Do we break your brain?
Judge Dredd.
Excellent answer. All right. What about you, Miss Jenny JF Posthumous?
Judge Dredd.
All right, Michael, you gonna redeem it?
No, I'm RoboCop. RoboCop all the way. Original OG RoboCop.
I'd do that for $1. All right. What about you, Josh?
Judge Dredd, definitely.
Okay. Scott?
I'm such a follower. I like the 12,000 what? The 2012 Judge Dredd because it fits my mood lately, I guess.
Was that the Stallone one or was that the
No, that's
The Carl Urban.
It was the one
Carl
with
Urban.
it was real dark and super violent and had lots of like acid trippy scenes in there where you're kind of like, what is happening in this show? But I liked it. It was good. I feel like they should have done a whole series in that kind of what do you call that? Not a post-apocalyptic future world.
Dystopian?
Tonight. Yeah, I'm super articulate tonight. You guys are in for a treat. That's some of my best words right there.
All right, yeah, it's definitely was very dystopian. I'll give you that one.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
What about you, Steve?
I'm with Scott. Big fan of that one. I think part of it though it comes down to how much I love the raid, and that
Great
that
movie.
and the raid are so they're so simpatico with each other.
Yeah.
In fact, that was one of the big accusations when that 2012 movie came out is that they, just ripped off the raid.
Lifted some stuff.
Yeah.
I do have to admit, going back with Michael though, on the original RoboCop, because I worked at a movie theater when that came out, and I remember sitting there at the movie theater in a small town, and these people taking their kids out after the first person was blown to smithereens
with the Ed 209.
Yeah, and they're yeah.
It's the most dangerous condenser microphone in the universe, right there.
Yeah, right there you go. So it definitely was. It defied expectations. Give it that.
Is Judge Dredd open license now, or is it still IP? Is the copyright?
Oh, I'm sure it's still copyrighted.
It's definitely copyrighted.
I know a lot of stuff just reached the end of their copyrights. I wasn't sure if Judge Dredd, the original, was one of them. So, all right, Nick.
Steamboat Willie?
Yeah, like they're already going after him for Steamboat Willie, saying it's infringing on their brand because they trademarked Mickey, and so they're trying to get around it. It'll be an interesting case to follow if you're interested in this. But Nick, I didn't want to forget you tonight, like I have in the past. So I love you, brother. Judge Dredd, Time Cop, or what was the RoboCop?
Yeah, nobody chose Time Cop. I mean, it's Jean-Claude Van Damme. I'm going to go with Time Cop this one.
Oh yeah, roundhouse kicks.
Yeah, and time travel, which was cool, and time paradox.
Oh yeah,
cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed that movie.
I liked all of them, but RoboCop was the first one, so it was one of the first sci-fi that I watched. And as LaVoice is pointing out in the side chat, yes, none of them were technically space cops, which is the general topic for today, but they were sci-fi cops, and it was the best we could find.
I will tell you, in trying to do research for the show earlier today, which of course I left all of that on my machine at work, because I was shamelessly researching on my boss's dime. But there are not a lot of space cop films out there.
There aren't.
There are not. There's a couple of series. One actually called Star Cops from the BBC. And I think the most popular example might be Outland. Sean Connery as a federal marshal on the moon of Io.
Mhm.
Not a lot of space cops out there.
Almost
Most
none,
of the
which
lists
is
are
interesting.
sci-fi cops.
There's a pretty decent one in the first season or so of The Expanse. That's Miller's whole character. He's basically space security cop.
True.
I gotta admit, I've never seen that show, so I don't know.
It's also
books are fantastic. Books are fantastic. Show does a great job.
Normally we would say we'd ask people that wore the uniform because we're veteran focused, veteran friendly. But since this is Space Cops, we're going to ask this question to the 3 former or current cops on the panel, and I will again go in alphabetical order as decided by the great and mighty oracles of Word. So they use first names, not last. Don't hate me, or maybe not. I don't know. We're just going with it. They're going to mock me either way, and they're going to send me memes about how stupid infantry is. I know how it goes. But Josh, so how do you feel like your time, separate from just being in the Air Force, how do you think your time as a police officer affects the way you tell stories?
Well, it definitely affected how I wrote my first trilogy, the Valor trilogy, just because it was a blend of military sci-fi and investigative work, and that the main character isn't technically a city cop. He's more of like a federal investigator, but I used a lot of the skills and investigative techniques that are pretty much germane to any type of law enforcement agency in that book.
What do the Germans have to do with anything?
Yeah, right. But I think more importantly, my time as a cop really gave me huge insights to how people are, just in general, and also under stress. And writing intense scenes or gun battles. I was never deployed into a combat zone, but I definitely understand how people react under stress and in those kind of situations, and those really lend a lot to my writing, just pulling just from general day-to-day stuff.
Okay. What about you, Nick? You tell stories through the comic book medium, and you're a current Border Patrol agent. So
Yes.
How do you feel like your time being law enforcement, although federal instead of city or state, how do you think that affects the way you create stories?
I think it's similar to like my experience in the military. It's the mindset's still the same. You go out on the job, you want to come back every night. You meet strange and interesting people that you work with, and that is also your opposition, criminals. So a lot of those things, you're just, and because I'm a comic book guy, I'm like, oh man, this would make a really good comic. Oh, I'm going to throw this guy into the comic. So it helps. I think it's because most writers draw from life and their experiences anyway. So, this is just a very specific and interesting and strange job. It just kind of gives you more or a different perspective on people and surroundings and things like that. It's a unique experience that when you throw it in story form, it becomes interesting.
I would think it would help you become more empathetic because you tend to meet people on the worst days of their lives.
I was just going to say that for law enforcement, even if federal or state, it doesn't matter. Every single day that you work is your average day. That's your normal day. And almost everybody you're coming in contact with, it's the worst day of their life, literally. And it takes a little while to get used to that and come to grips with that. But it also speaks a lot to the pressures that you're under all the time, having to deal with that kind of stress and the people, how they're reacting to it.
And you also get to see the world through gallows humor because first responders and military all develop sort of different flavors of that. And then when that mask slips just a little bit to the general normie public, they're like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "Well, if you did half of what we did."
Like, Steve, does this guy need help?
Yeah.
Let's not open that door. What is wrong?
Yeah, Steve gets that a lot with his horror, I'm told. Although I do like when you tell people as you write torture scenes that you just write what you know. Although maybe you don't say that in a panel full of cops.
I do. I
Just
say
say that
that
right
in
to make it
public
up
as
for him.
often as I can.
It's plausible deniability. So when it really happens, people are like, "Oh no, he just says that." All right, Scott, how do you feel like your time as a police officer affects the way you create stories for your viewing public?
Well, I was going to just say what they said and crib off of them for everything, but I do have a couple things I could add, and everything they said is absolutely on the mark. So, but I would also say that like your constant exposure to characters, because every single person that you encounter has a story to tell, and if you listen and pay attention, you just pick up lots of material, not necessarily in the obvious things, sometimes in the obvious plot related things, but a lot of times you'll need a character that, is tripped or something. And you have all these different experiences where you've, gone through some moments like that. And it gives it a little bit of depth. There's some pitfalls, but I guess we can probably talk about those in a different section, so I don't just blabber on mindlessly.
And I will say, while I won't ask the rest of the panel because if they're not wearing a badge, I don't want to cheapen the questions we ask the first responders and military. But I will say Jenny and Michael both have kids that wear a badge. Stabby married one. Steve was the child of one. I'm like the only odd man out here.
You're friends with one.
You fit, and
You're
you're
friends with many of them.
It's okay. You kind of fit. You're a criminal. It's all right.
Yeah, I mean, I've got more speeding tickets.
We could slot you in.
And I was charged with a misdemeanor for code violation on my siding. So, I mean, that's almost the same thing as a hardened criminal. I got out of it, though, because I fixed it because I'm a good citizen.
Aren't you a booze runner for a while?
You don't talk about that?
He lived on Garber Road.
JR, didn't your mom just adopt me?
Well, yeah, but you don't.
Therefore, you're my brother, and Nick is your brother-in-law.
Yeah,
there you go. My mom likes her. My mom likes everyone more than me. Man, that's a problem. I really should talk to a doctor or something about that.
She sent me a lot of food.
She made me cook it though.
What is this psychoanalyst going to tell you? Get used to it. That'll be $85, please.
Pretty much. All right.
Ooh, that's a cheap one.
Yeah, it's government rates.
1989.
Like 300. That'd be 375.
Been a while since I was in therapy.
Yeah. So we gathered the panel because we had the idea that we wanted to talk about what potential law enforcement in a science fiction setting might look like. I think most of us are used to the idea of bounty hunters. I mean, we start with Boba Fett, if a lot of people's first experience in the Star Wars universe. So we're going to open it with that question. Do you think bounty hunter stories count as space cops?
I would say if you're trying to actually write a space cop story, probably not, because cops and bounty hunters operate on a very different playing field and have to abide by, well, bounty hunters might not have any rules.
I got a bounty hunter story. I'll tell you
definitely,
right now.
Yeah, same. If you're writing space cops, there's regulations, there's laws, department-wide, city, state, federal, all those type of things that regulate law enforcement. There's a commission that stipulates requirements for those jobs and maintaining of those credentials. And a bounty hunter, I mean, you've got to pay for a license, and sure, you technically got to obey the law, but whereas a cop needs a warrant or some legal precedent to do something, a bounty hunter doesn't really operate under the same standards.
Yeah,
a couple of really good series that illustrate those differences. Rick Partlow did a series, started with a book called Star Bounty, and that was an ex-federal marshal who's now a bounty hunter who still has dealings with the other marshals that he used to work with. And so you got to see a lot of the contrast between what he can do and what they can and can't do. But I think a really interesting take on the whole bounty hunter space cop trope was M.G. Herron did a series called The Gun Files. which involved a human bounty hunter in Texas who stumbles into the truth that there is a vast alien community living in Texas, and actual space cops come down and ask him to help keep an eye on some of the more dangerous, nasty ones. It's a great series. I think he's about to relaunch it with a 4th book, actually.
Nice.
But it was a neat take on the trope, because you got a human bounty hunter. He's not really taking bounties on these guys, but he still has to investigate and keep eyes on them and report back to the real space cops.
It's almost like a CI with guns. He's
Yeah,
an
pretty much.
informant, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. And if I'm jumping out of line, somebody just smack me. But what I think in response to your initial question, JR, is there a difference between the bounty hunter and the space cop? And I believe there really is, because bounty hunters, if you tell somebody I wrote a space bounty hunter story like Boba Fett, they're going to immediately know what you're talking about, and they're probably not going to think about cop stuff. Now, I think they can coexist, but I think that for the purpose of classification, like to most readers or viewers, depending on what you're doing, that probably bounty hunter stories and space cop stories are not the same.
Okay.
Have to agree. I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say bounty hunters, like y'all have said, they don't have to follow the laws, they don't have to follow the rules, whereas a cop, they're expected to follow the laws, follow the rules. You're not going to find a cop, breaking into a house, whereas you kind of would expect it from a bounty hunter.
To riff off.
I was going to say, there's more rules that the cops are going to follow than a bounty hunter, and that's kind of expected.
Yeah, and to riff off of that, I think it's a matter of kind of like the attitude and perspective through which you're telling that story. Like what you just said, the idea that a cop is supposed to obey the law and do these things. In fiction, look, and we all understand that, in fiction, we all understand that you're going to have to suspend some of that disbelief and stuff. But if you're telling the story from a cop point of view, the instances in which they circumvent the law that they are supposed to protect, or do things outside of those rules, then that it means more in that context. Whereas if you're doing a bounty hunter story, you expect that, and if they don't do that, then the reader's like, well, what's wrong with this bounty hunter? This bounty hunter sucks.
In a space cop story, they're part of an organization because they're cops.
Correct.
They belong to a department. Yeah. Whereas when you're a bounty hunter, you might just be one guy, and maybe you check in when you turn in your bounty. But the bounty hunter procedural versus police procedural would look a lot different.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, and also I think.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Stabby.
I was going to say, if we're going to talk bounty hunter versus law enforcement in the Star Wars universe, then we have to touch base on the Mandalorian show and Cobb Vanth, the sheriff on Tatooine. Because
for
he's
sure.
technically in space, he is technically law enforcement, and he's in the Star Wars universe. So I think the sheriff may, hold the torch for the cops in space.
He was a marshal in that. The episode he was in, marshal.
He looked
when they got Oliphant to play him, they really, really just said, "Hey, really, it's just your character from Justified in space."
Yeah, for sure.
And
one of the other big
upset
differences. No one was. I love that character. I think one of the other differences that people might not immediately think of when comparing the two is, typically speaking, a cop, whether in space or not, is trying to build a case, and for that case to hold up legally. And so not only are the laws required to be followed, but you've got to follow the procedure of like evidence, chain of custody, all of that stuff. And a bounty hunter isn't looking to make a case. They're just looking to find their guy and get a payday. And they don't care about, preservation of evidence or any of that.
They'd probably prefer there was as little as possible after the shoot.
Yeah, no joke, right? Yeah. Did we lose JR?
Go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, I mentioned Cara Dune from The Mandalorian because I think she was a marshal too, wasn't she? I mean, it's
She
been a while since
eventually
I've
became one.
watched it, but you know.
Yeah.
She started
Well, they
out
were-
as a mercenary and then became a marshal in one of those
Yeah.
backwater towns, backwater
Well,
planets.
You know,
And
Yeah.
before they canned her, that was the whole what her whole series was going to be about, was her being space Star Wars marshal.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
you could
She
also
was amazing in the part too, but
you could also niche down quite a bit, because there's a difference between a a space cop sheriff story. I wrote one of those in Dark Landing with Craig Martell. There's
Very good.
your space cop investigator, like in The Expanse, and then you have, like, your street cop type space cop, like, in some of those other ones we talked about.
And you
So
got
let's-
Josh Hayes with his hybrid JAG cop
Yeah.
For sure.
story. I love those books, by the way. Those are great.
Oh, thank you.
For the record, I agree with you, and I disagree with your publisher, Josh. In the future, they're still not getting away from paper. They've been claiming they're going to go paperless for the last 2 decades. I don't see it happening. Yeah, they're going to be printing that crap out.
Yeah, no
Oh.
joke.
I can tell you, they've tried to digitize most of the stuff that we do in the field in my job. And when your phone just shits the bed, it goes 10-7 on you.
Yeah.
I got 200 bodies I got to process in the field. And this little government phone, this little Samsung, was like my only saving grace in having to do a mountain of paperwork. So,
The,
or like
the
a
joke that-
Facebook.
The
Yeah.
joke
Yeah.
that JR is referring to is in the first Valor book. I had one of the characters walk into the boss's office, and in the original draft, it was covered in files and all of this. And the character makes I thought we were going paperless joke, because all federal agencies and military and all that, they've been going paperless for years. And I thought it would be funny, but it was in the year like 26 something, like way far in the future. And Steve said, they're not going to have paper in the 26th century. And so I acquiesced to his editing notes, and instead of having it be paper, I had it pads, and I said that they were going padless, so I could still keep the joke. But now I get shit about it every time.
That joke has a whole different feel.
Yeah,
Yes,
for sure.
it does. But I will say I agree with you. I don't think we're ever getting away from paper, because when technology fails, paper's forever.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Back to papyrus.
it's one last thing on the
space
bounty.
paper.
Yeah,
Space
One last thing
paper.
on-
That's a whole series now.
It's got to have the angled corners though, like in Battlestar. Otherwise,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not space
So
paper.
now we get Dunder Mifflin Galactic.
That's what I was looking
Yes,
for. I couldn't-
100%. Yeah.
absolutely. So it's my understanding, because I don't have the law enforcement experience the rest of you do, but bounty hunters only pick up after the cops have done their part already,
No, that's not right.
right?
No,
So
it's
bounty
when they
hunters-
skip bail.
In the United States, when you bond out or pay bail, you sign an agreement that says, if I don't show up for court, then you guys can come get me because you guys paid my bail. And due to a really old law, that means bounty hunters can just kick in anybody's door where they think they're at if they have their bond. And so, like, you have these stories. What usually happens is the bondsmen call us, or bounty hunters, or however we want to call them, when it's gone horribly wrong. And they're like, yeah, we're going to have some help here from the police because we booted this door and it was a gang house and everything's going wrong now. So that's my experience. I have a funny story about a CI who was a bounty hunter or a bondsman who tried to go pick somebody up, but all he had was a knife, and we wouldn't go get this guy for him. It's like, we can't go in there. That's a misdemeanor warrant. We can't prove he's in there. You think he's in there, but we're not going to go get this guy for you. And he just took a knife out of his pocket and booted the door and went in there and grabbed the guy and dragged him out. Holy shit, that just happened.
Crazy. Yeah.
Nice. So,
Sorry.
no, that's totally okay. So, do you guys have favorite tropes when it comes to putting law enforcement in sci-fi settings? Do any of the crime thriller tropes transfer over?
I think all the tropes transfer over. For me, it doesn't matter where you put it, because the setting is just paint anyway. It doesn't matter whether if you're writing a cop book. It doesn't matter where you have it. It's all the same. All the work's going to be the same. The technology might change, the way that you collect evidence might change, but all the investigative stuff, all of that stuff is going to be the same. So you could pick up a news story right now or read a police report right now and just take that entire case and make it in the future, and it would be exactly the same process, basically.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
totally
like
agree.
I like a buddy cop trope. I think it works good in sci-fi because because in a lot of genres, action genres, space opera genres, you have kind of like what's been real popular lately is the snarky AI sidekick. Well, that's basically one half of a buddy cop type thing, and I think that's a trope that works well in the genre, in either genre.
Okay. What about you, Stabby? Do you have any favorite cop drama tropes? Yes. Now you got unmute.
Sorry, I was laughing at the chat. Anyways,
I'll pay more attention to the chat, apparently.
I was dying over there. No, like I think I struggle with really what is the definition of the space cop, because I think once you put anything in space, the whole law enforcement dynamic starts turning military.
That's a good point.
Look at Super Troopers. They're out there killing the bugs. It started out as protecting
Starship Troopers, honey.
Starship Troopers. Sorry,
Super
wrong
Troopers,
Troopers.
completely different movie, which is also
Well, I'm sharing.
They should be in the same movie.
My brain dyslexia with everybody tonight. Apparently,
These space nosberries taste like space nosberries.
they really do. They really do. They're in my cup. Anyways,
for $20, I'll call that person a chicken snarlack.
I think once you take it off of the planet and you put it into space, it stops being so much law enforcement and becomes military. When it's protecting the planet, it becomes military. When it becomes protecting the human race, it becomes military, because it's not just Starship Troopers. It's, you see it in Star Wars, you see it in Star Trek, even Men in Black. Like, once it goes from, being on Earth versus being in space, I think it changes the whole dynamics, because it even touches base in horror movies. So you have movies like Jason X, where on Earth he's cryogenically frozen and he's guarded by law enforcement for all the crazy stuff he did to the camp counselors. But when they take him up into space, it's the military taking care of him, not the cops. So I think once you put them in space, that just changes the whole dynamic.
That's a really good point, because, like, for example, when we're a cop story, you're solving a case, you're like catching a killer, you're getting justice. But when you, in a lot of space opera and military sci-fi, the stakes become, I'm not solving a case, I'm saving the world, I'm saving the galaxy, I'm securing the jump gate, I'm making first contact. And so that's a really good point that you brought up.
Yeah, it's primarily the biggest reason that I wrote the Duranian Justice Association in Galaxy's Most Wanted the way I did, because I set it up intentionally that space, as we know it in this series, is largely lawless. There's some big things they agree on, like, chattel slavery is bad and trafficking of sentient beings is bad and stuff like that. But drugs, don't really care, that kind of thing. They don't really have it. But the Duranians are trying to introduce these concepts of law and order into a largely lawless galaxy, and they're being rather militaristic about it. They've got their own space navy. They can commandeer other military vehicles if they need them. So yeah, to your point, Stabby, I do agree. When the territory gets that freaking big, you almost have to go that route.
Do you, though? Because I could see, jurisdictions are going to change, but I could see currently, I mean, what Scott did it with his Dark Landing series. With his Dark Landing series, it was basically space Western law enforcement type story, and that works. you could use the analog of the Wild Wild West, where, you know, one lawman and a gun and a horse was patrolling, you know, the whole Utah territory, or, you know, insert whatever. I don't think just because that's the way it's been done so far in fiction that that's the way it has to be.
Yeah.
There was one show, and now I'm drawing a blank on the name, but I'm fairly confident it was a space cop, and it was kind of the opposite of what you're talking about. It was far future, but he was trying to solve a case, and maybe he wasn't actually a cop. Maybe it was based on a Philip K. Dick book, and it became I think a Netflix series. And
Altered Carbon?
yes, Altered Carbon. Wasn't he a cop?
He's not a cop.
But
No.
He's actually military.
But it,
Ex-military, yeah.
Throw it out the window then.
but your point is right
They were
on, though,
kinda
because
Yeah,
it's written as a
Yeah.
hard-boiled detective novel.
that's
Yeah,
right.
okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's,
Now,
and that how
film noir
that
in
feels.
space is huge. There's a lot of examples of noir
And-
detective stuff in space.
Yeah. And that was that's the trope that I really like. I like going into the noir side of things because I think there's so much.
Great series.
There are so many opportunities within, you know, science fiction, whether we're talking space opera or especially if you go into the cyberpunk angle, which is more what Altered Carbon is,
Yeah.
where you can really, really, really lean into kind of that whole trope of the tarnished knight, you know,
Yep.
sort of a thing. And I freaking love that stuff.
I actually went murder mystery with the sci-fi series that I wrote. Hopefully it'll be out sometime this year. The editor had a lot of life stuff happening, but I had a homicide detective on an alien planet, and she's half human, half Calasian, and I actually ended up talking with my eldest, and he helped really with everything, because it was like, okay, I have this evidence, what would work for a sci-fi, and he would go, okay, well, it's not, you can't use this, or this because it's too far in the future. And he give suggestions and everything. He'd tell me if I had the procedures right, the bantering between the department, the officers in the department. And honestly, the whole thing would not have been created and fleshed out as much if it hadn't been for him.
That's cool.
I also think, and I really like what Jenny just said, and to kind of piggyback off of that some more, I think what we're talking about here in the difference here, a lot of it starts relating to what the stakes of the story are and the stakes of the conflict are. When we're talking space opera stuff, yeah, a lot of the stakes tend to be planet, galactic wide type of things, and yeah, that definitely lends more towards can lend towards a more militaristic outlook. But when if you go more murder mystery or more noir, a lot of those stakes are more personal because they tend to relate to the loss of one person, the troubles of one person,
Yep.
or corporate corruption or things of that nature, or internal department corruption, right? I mean, that's a huge noir trope.
That's exactly what I did for the first one.
Yeah. And so I think it just depends on the stakes, right? And the type of story you want to tell. Neither are wrong, obviously. But the stakes that you choose will largely determine it will largely determine the type of story you're telling and the way you choose to tackle these things. And the way you structure like the departments and the rules and the organizations and all that kind of stuff. So
For sure.
Before we get back to it, we're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the man, or men this time, because Steve and Larry were nice enough to sponsor this episode.
The war between Al Nassia and the Empire of Kolakolvia is in its 100th year. Casualties grow on both sides as the conflict leaves no corner of the world untouched. Ilarion Glaskov's quiet life on the fringes of the Empire is thrown into chaos when an impossible tragedy strikes his village. When he is conscripted into the Tsarist military, he is sent to serve in The Wall, an elite regiment that pilots suits of armors made from the husks of dead golems. But the Great War is not the only, or even the worst, danger facing Valerian, as he is caught in a millennia-old conflict between two goddesses. He must survive the ravages of trench warfare, horrific monsters from another world, and the treacherous internal politics of the country he serves. Servants of War, new military fantasy by Master of Horror Steve Diamond and international bestseller Larry Correa. Available on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. Pick up your copy today.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. Hold on. Solo layout. Come on. Don't fail me now, StreamYards. Woo!
Ah,
Oof.
yeah.
But
It
it's
looks,
signed.
it looks so good. Thank you, Vanna.
Is it
Very
signed?
nice. Very nice.
No, it's not signed. Here, Steve, can you sign this real quick? Just
Give me a second.
Pass it up the
See, if we would have planned that, I would have had a hardcover with me, and then
oh,
just,
that
like,
would have been
pulled it
so
down.
great.
That would have
Yeah.
been dope.
That was so great.
Why do I never think of this cool stuff before? That would have been
Always after.
hilarious.
We'll fix it in editing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we say that on this podcast a lot, and it never happens.
Editing takes a lot of work. All right. And I
It really
don't like,
does. It really does. That's my job.
yeah, she does the editing now. So
I wouldn't know. I haven't edited things since back in the day when we were using 3 1/4-inch tape for television.
I'm
Yes,
just going
I
to smile.
know.
At So were there any other tropes that anyone wanted to talk about before we move on to tones?
I like
The donuts.
yeah. I actually have found in some other sources written that writing about pets and food is often a reader favorite. They like that shit. But and so do I, actually, because I remember reading Dean Koontz, and whenever they talked about their dog, or he had these long scenes where he had this one. What was it? It was in Mr. Murder and Dragon Tears. I don't know if you ever read either of those, but basically the bad guy had the super metabolism, so he could eat anything he wanted, and he would go on these binge fests. And I was like, this is awesome. Wish I could eat like that.
You had a few food diatribes in Galactic Shield.
Yeah. So in Galactic Shield, what I was going to talk about for tropes is I did a squad thing. So I was trying to make it like the Shield, or any of these NCIS, kind of a team of investigators. And I don't know that it came off quite like that, because it's so easy to drift back into the military, because I needed them to be able to use battle mechs. I'm like, well, it's because they were all veterans, and then that brought along some of their demons that they had to deal with. Like they had a lost friend who they had to go kind of dig out of this drug den that was wound up being connected to other parts of the plot. And it was really easy to go down that military sci-fi thing. But that is a trope I like, the squad. That works, I think, in military sci-fi. It also works in cop stories, because both have squads and those tight, small groups of people.
So that's
You gotta love the good cop, bad cop too.
Oh, yeah. I like bad cop, and bad cop, worst cop.
You
Bad
see
cop,
it
worst
in
cop.
you see it in so much things that they even touch base on it in Guardians of the Galaxy with the Nova Corps.
Yeah.
You have like the goofy cop and then the more serious one, and you're like, good cop, bad cop. So
Yeah.
I think that's a fun trope that they always touch on.
Yeah, that can be very useful.
We
So I
leaned
mentioned-
into the donut joke when I was working nights, and there were 4 of us that all had the same days off, and every night, around 2 a.m. when we had about an hour left of shift, was when the donut store started making their donuts for the new day, and we would go and park in front of the donut store and just chill and drink coffee, and just for the memes, because we knew people were going to drive by and go, look at them.
Didn't even have any donuts.
No, we were just drinking coffee.
Yeah.
If it
So
makes
the-
you feel any better, the Border Patrol not only gave every single person on shift a donut for National Donut Day, but they took it and made an Instagram reel out of it. Of
Nice.
eating a green donut and taking a bite out of it. So if you want to see Nick eating a
Yeah, and
green
they got my
donut.
fat ass.
So the donut joke got me thinking, because I actually took some criminal justice classes as an undergrad, because I had spaces I had to fill. And I had to actually research why. And it started, the joke was that donut shops were one of the places open 24 hours a day. So they would get robbed at night. So they would offer free donut and coffee to the cops. So the cops would hang out there off hours. They got robbed less. It was such a trope. There was a movie, a cop movie, I can't remember what it was, where they actually tweakers rob a donut store and suddenly you turn and everyone in the building isn't just a civilian. They've all like guns on them.
I saw that, but I can't remember what movie it was.
I just remember it was about had a sports car. But anyway,
you'll find it.
But that got me thinking: there's a reason most of the tropes start. So if you're going to use them, you almost want to think about why the trope exists, so you factor it in instead of just a one-liner, because that can add depth to it. I think
there's a before I forget, I want to. While we're talking about tropes, there's a trope that's not used, or tropes in plural, that's not used a lot in cop fiction, and probably because not very many people realize it. But if you watch when a cop enters a building anywhere, let's say it's just a gas station, watch what people do when cops enter the building. It'll be a number of things, and it always happens. Somebody will say, "Oh, he's got a warrant," or they'll put up their hands and say, "He did it."
Jail. He did it.
Or things like that. But also the things that the one that always made me so angry is when you walk down the aisle and a parent standing with their kid, and the parent looks down at their kid and says, "You better act good or I'm going to have that officer take you to jail." And it happens all the time. And I always told the parents, I don't know why you would tell your kid that, because you want your kid to feel safe and comfortable around a cop, and you want them to come for me to help.
Not afraid of them.
Yeah. And so if you're writing like tropes, or you're looking for some bit of realism, you can add that stuff, but include the negative response that the cop or the officer would have to that thing, because every single time it happened, I wanted to punch the dude in the face. And of course I didn't, because I liked my job. But
I turned around one time and said, "Well, actually, he's 9. He can't be arrested, but I can arrest you."
True.
I think that was nearly as funny as I did.
Totally different. In my line of work, when I walk into the little convenience store or whatever, all I hear is "pinche migra."
There's also some of those things that people do.
Yeah, a lot of that too. And then I'm getting like Takis and putting nacho cheese on it, and they're like,
my
"Oh,
favorite
my
way to say to cops was always, "Search me. I might have something on me." That would be what my characters would say.
There you go. I was working a part-time at Walmart, and this guy walked by and said, "Yeah, he did it." And so I just took my handcuffs out and hooked him up. Fortunately, they have a sense of humor.
My son's chief, he came by to visit, and he was telling us that a parent actually, said the line about, if you're not good, they'll take you to jail. He turned around and was like, "No, I won't take the kid to jail, but I'll take you to jail."
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's a good response.
I'm always super nice to kids, and you start bonding with them and stuff, because your job there is you got to let them know not to be scared of you. So you immediately get down their level and find out what they like, and it can be kind of fun, but it's usually not what the parents want when you're like become their buddy instantly.
We actually ended up asking the resource officer at the local schools if they would visit my son's classroom after my eldest was killed in the line of duty in June. And the response I got was, they don't like going to the elementary school because it scares the kids. And I'm like, that's all the reason to go.
Yeah, go there. Unless you're Josh, then you'll scare me even more. But
I'm like, yeah, but if you go to the reason we asked was because my youngest 2 are autistic, and the youngest is 7, nonverbal, and elopes. He is Houdini. And anytime he would see someone in a uniform, he would elope less. So we were hoping the resource officer went and even just said hi, maybe it wouldn't keep him from eloping from the school, which he actually escaped from last year before everything happened, because he's Houdini.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have no clue if they did or if they have been or not. I haven't asked, but
That reminds me of another. I have one good trope people could use. It's easy, and it's stickers. And Josh,
because I carry them in my cargo pocket, little secret agent badges.
Yeah, stickers and little things like that, because they always ask, and you could have a space cop that gives kids the equivalent of a sticker.
Little holo.
You could do that. That could go somewhere.
I've still got mine.
Yeah. Can I get one of those? Put on my junior police sticker.
Yeah.
Thing.
I got a whole roll of them. I'll send one to you.
There you go.
The opposite of all of this is when your dad's a cop, and he finds out where you are when you're growing up, teenager and stuff, and he knows where you're going to drive, so he goes and pulls you over at any chance he gets.
Like an oddly specific story,
just to terrify you.
Yeah,
I know. Hypothetically speaking, I mean, I heard it happen to a friend of mine.
Yeah,
yeah, or
that's awesome.
If your dad, I don't know, happens to be in charge of the airport for a while, and meets you as you're deplaning to have security take you in front of everybody.
Oh no!
Hypothetically speaking, I hear that it's funny for everyone else, but not for me or you, whoever. Hypothetically, the person.
I was on the bomb squad when I was on the department, and we did a lot of work with the federal guys that I can't remember if they're DEA or ATF, but they worked with the airport security people in the screening areas. And so we did a lot of co-training with them, and I was going to Clan Lab school to learn how to make meth, and I was going through the line, and I saw the guy up in the deal, and my first thought was, I wonder, and then I was like, no, there's absolutely no way that I'm going to do anything quirky because it would just cause too much of a ruckus. And so I made it through and then said hi. And I said, I almost, and he said, I saw you. And I knew what you were thinking. And I'm glad that you did not.
Yeah.
I think the scariest moment has to be when you're sitting there in 5th grade and all the DARE officers walk in and you realize all 3 of them are best friends with your uncle.
Nice.
And you're just sitting there like this. Don't call on me. Don't call on me. Don't call on me. Don't call on me.
So when you're writing these or reading these police in space, these sci-fi settings, because some of them can be on Earth. If it's sci-fi, it's just far enough in the future. Is there a certain tone that you think the stories need, or can it work in any kind of lighthearted story, a darker, grittier story? Does it
can
matter?
be either, man. I mean, look at the differences in cop movies, just non-space cop movies. I just mentioned in the chat, so I'm going to say it here. Running Scared, Gregory Hines, Billy Crystal, a couple of Chicago detectives. God, I love that movie. That's one of the best cop movies I've ever seen in my life. It's horribly unrealistic. I don't care. I love it. But you can do stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of the tone that I set with Galaxy's Most Wanted. There's a lot of humor, a lot of weird, crazy stuff happens in it. And so, yeah, you can have that, but you can also have the darker, more serious movies and the psychological thriller movies types in space as well. I mean, you're going to have serial killers in space, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think that is important. I think you can have, we can come up with lots of different examples. There's all kinds of different tones. I think when you're deciding on tone, you need to know your audience and what audience you're trying to reach. In my experience, because my space cop stuff, Dark Landing was super fun and it was real popular. I mean, people liked it. I had people come tell me about it. And then my Galactic Shield was a lot darker, and I had people that loved it and are still harassing me to write more books in it, but it didn't have the same appeal it didn't have as wide of an appeal because it was also like right after 2020, and people didn't want to have dark, depressing things in their lives, and they wanted something that was more fun. And so you could do either tone. You can do the Beverly Hills Cop, or you can do the Shield.
Yeah.
And you'll find readers for both.
Banana in a tailpipe, man.
Fall for that.
Well, yeah,
That,
I mean,
I would love to see that in a space setting. Like
Oh, yeah.
I ain't falling for the banana in the
In the reactor.
in the
in the
reactor.
The trilithium drive generator.
Well, I mean, it's. I think I like your point, Scott, because I mean, it's. Am I aiming for people who enjoy Brooklyn Nine-Nine, or am I aiming for people who would rather see Bosch? And
Yeah.
you know,
Some
those
people will
two.
like both, but not everybody likes
You're
both.
right. Yeah, I mean, of course, there's a Venn diagram, right? But that overlap isn't is as much as it is. Now, me personally, I'm more invested in the of course the horror, which tends to lend towards the thriller elements, the suspense elements, sometimes the supernatural elements, and and towards the darker side of things. And so I care about the emotional impact and the horrificness that families who are who are either in law enforcement or law enforcement adjacent. I think that that's hyper powerful stuff. Um, I remember growing up and and my dad was fairly new in the Sacramento Sheriff's Department, and it was like,
Sacktown, my town.
yeah, and so uh, he was working nights at the main jail downtown, while also going on patrol and stuff here and there. And at midnight we get a phone call, and then my mom runs out of the house almost immediately. And of course, at the time I was 16. This is a long time ago, and that emotional impact of that is I barely remember anything from high school. In fact, I actively try to not think about it. But that right there, like that feeling of helplessness and the horror involved in it. I'm not saying I want people to experience that, but if they do, I want them to experience it in fiction in a safe manner, in a way that they can distance themselves from it
You
if
can
they need to, if
process it
they
a little
want to.
bit.
For sure.
They can process it, and whatever I read, it will never be as awful as the real thing.
Yeah.
And so, so for me personally, that's why I tend to go towards I tend to write towards the more the emotional darkness of things, because I've experienced part of it. I worried about that stuff. I feared it daily. Um, and less so when my dad was chief of police of a few different towns, as his career went on. And so much less so at that point, right? Like at that point, he's a desk jockey, um, you know, just trying not to get sued by morons in his department.
Yeah.
But
More of an
or
administrator.
anywhere. Yeah.
but that's why I said earlier, like I really love the noir tropes, because you have guys that, in spite of the horror and the terror, and like what Josh was saying towards the very top of the episode, where how, when you're going out, you're seeing everybody's worst day. Um, that how does the cop react to that? How does the family react to that when the cop
The
comes
problem
home?
is that you start not, because that's real when you see the really dark stuff firsthand. But
Yeah.
then when you see normal people walking around at the grocery store, you're like, what is underneath the surface? Because you
Yeah.
bet there probably is something dark there, but you don't know. And I think the appeal of really dark fiction is that you can just look at that and process it. And
Yeah.
when I write cop stuff, I slide towards the darkness a lot because of some of the assignments I had in my career. But I also use the dark cop humor too, and sometimes that goes horribly wrong. Sometimes my editor is like, "What is that you just said?" And I'm
Well,
like,
one of the things too,
Yeah.
when you talk about tone, maybe not in the tone of the book, but even just the tone of a sequence. We mentioned
Mhm.
gallows humor, and I don't think cops are the only ones that use that. I mean, nurses are really good examples of that, and sometimes can be even worse than
"Oh
cops.
yeah, they're way
It's
worse sometimes."
But if you're going for a certain tone in a sequence, like if uh, and you're not familiar with law enforcement or that environment, there are times where it's on and times where it's off. And if you're in an intense situation like a shooting call or some kind of high profile thing, most of the time it's on, and only after does all the other stuff come out. And I've seen a few examples. in books where the gallows humor kind of comes out in the middle of all of that. And typically speaking, if it's in progress like that, that shit doesn't happen. You're
There's
on.
no time for it.
And it's all business. And after the business is done, then the jokes get carried away. Or, you know, if your partner got knocked down in a fight, you're going to beat the crap out of the other guy. But then after the fight, you're going to give your partner shit for getting knocked down. But it's not going to happen during. And so that might be,
when you tell the story later, it might have some funny bits in it.
100%. Yeah, exactly. But that's one of the things I think maybe focusing on tone when you're writing is just making sure that you're putting those elements in the right context and in the right order.
That's a super interesting point, Josh. And I talk about this. You know, generally people only let me come on shows when they talk about horror stuff. They're like, if it's anything else, we're not going to allow you on the show, Steve. But you know, in this, you know, sometimes they do. And one of the things I always talk about is kind of that nature between horror and humor, and the order in which you put it in can drastically change the impact of a scene.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of times you talk about like you're in the heat of the moment, the adrenaline's pumping, and then after the fact, there's the crash, and then people have a moment, and in the way some people process is through dark humor and things like that. Okay, and that's used to cut tension. But the reverse is also true, and that's that you can use, you know, you start with humor, and things are good, and then instead of so by leading with humor and then hitting you with horror, it actually makes the horror more horrific, because it psychologically makes the reader feel guilty for thinking about the humor right when the horror hits. Yeah, and I think that in detective fiction, especially detective fiction, cop fiction, and stuff like that, you can use that element, you know, that positional element of it, like you were saying, Josh, to maximum effect.
You know 100%. Who was good at that in non-space cop fiction was Elmore Leonard. Elmore Leonard was like the master of having a cop and a crook having a funny discussion, and then all of a sudden everything gets real. Mm-hmm. And it's such a juxtaposition from the banter of a few minutes ago to the serious, I'm taking you down kind of a vibe.
Joe Lansdale is another one that does that exceptionally well.
There's also with the gallows humor and how people use that to respond to situations. There's also the flip side of how other people around them react. Mm-hmm. And one of the novels, it's like one of the sequels, the main characters are in a duel, and the one ends up in the hospital because she was injured, and they're having, you know, gallows humor because of everything that happened. And her superior is like getting angrier and angrier and angrier because he thinks they're just, you know, making light of the situation, where it's actually the opposite. They're using it to work their way through everything that happened. And they have, yeah, exactly. And it takes a healer. That's what I call the doctors. It takes the healer to remind him, look, they're using it as a coping mechanism. And that's when he realizes, oh, okay, crap, I made a mistake. He has to reset. But you also have that dynamic you can work in, because not everyone is going to see that it's gallows humor. They're going to think, oh, they're just laughing about it.
Like,
and that's actually stuff that can happen in reality.
Have your cop character tell a story at a party full of non-cops and see how it goes.
Yeah.
I mentioned in the chat what my son actually did at one point, and yeah, it was a very bad choice of words, but cops actually say the wrong thing at the wrong time, and it can be humorous to some people, not so humorous to others.
And even worse when it makes it to the news.
My daughter is a nurse, and oh my gosh, she chooses dinner to tell the most awful stories about what she did that day. I'm like, stop it. I don't want to hear about boils and abscesses at dinner. Cut it out.
Some guy that just had a stroke and didn't care that he was just flashing his nuts to all the nurses.
Well, that actually happened, Nick. That was
happens a lot.
Yeah.
you don't realize until you do. So like when I was deploying to Iraq the second time, because we were doing a lot of traffic control stops, which is basically like traffic checkpoints, you got to check the vehicles. Now we didn't have like warrants or anything. We just kind of did it because we had the guns and they didn't. But you're looking for like contraband explosives, contraband guns, and sometimes that means you have to detain people. So before we deployed, we did a lot of training on how to restrain and apprehend prisoners, because normal infantry training is just kill them till they're dead and kill them some more and you're good. And one of the things I realized is when you're actually trying to restrain somebody and not have them like broken and destroyed at the end, it's a lot harder. So when you see the video like 10 on 1 and the guy's like, why does it take so many? It's because they're trying not to hurt the other guy. And it suddenly it's when you watch some of these stories, like, oh, that's why I'm watching. And no cop has ever come on and said that's why they're doing it, because it doesn't occur to them probably to explain that. So the average civilian's like, oh, look at those 10 cops beating up on that one 300-pound, 10-foot tall guy. Like, well, no, they're just trying to restrain him and not hurt him.
Yeah,
that's a good callback to like the bounty hunter / cop argument. Is a bounty hunter might just go 10-8 on somebody and start punching the crap out of them, and they knock them unconscious, put them in the back of their car, and take them to jail. Cops can't do that. I mean, it could happen, but just because they're resisting you, you can't turn around and punch them in the face until they start acquiescing to what you're asking them to do.
No, we all got cameras now. I mean,
sure.
On the federal side, we're wearing body cams. So like the whole, brush justice thing that used to happen quite a bit doesn't happen anymore because we don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
Well, I would also argue that in law enforcement, if depending on what size of department, like Josh and I work in the same department. So like, I might have 20 contacts a day. I might have 4 or 5 people I have to arrest a day, and the appropriate amount of people who resist and get froggy. And so, but like as a bounty hunter might have like one a month or whenever they get somebody or whatever and stuff. So what you learn through experience is that punching somebody is a terrible way to restrain somebody. It doesn't really restrain them. It's not effective, even if it was allowed to do it. A lot of those things you see in movies, like my favorite one, I saw one where they hit somebody in the back of the head with a club. You know how much damage you got to do to knock somebody out for hours? That's not something that's really that's not a great way to restrain somebody. It'd be much better to put them in an arm lock or a come along hold or use a taser or something that doesn't hurt them. Yeah. So
I love the taser though. I'm a huge fan of the taser. It's so funny when they get hit with it.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of the I'm a fan of the taser. I never carried pepper spray because I react horribly to it. But in my experience, the taser was only 50% effective. And I was in a fight with a guy in his front yard and tased him, and he just looked at me and kept coming. And I was like, well, that didn't work. And
clothing is an issue sometimes.
JR, in answer to your question, 10-8 is basically you're available. You're going on shift or
you're good to go.
You're good to go. But in the context I was using it, when you say you go 10-8 on somebody, it just means you're going in. You're on them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of means you went crazy.
Yeah.
You went to work. You went to town.
Yeah.
So that brings us to another point of getting it right when you're creating the ambiance is using the right terminology, because I can do that in a military story I lived that I can make it believable. I don't know that I could do that in a cop story without talking to actual cops and say, hey,
most of our 10 codes are different.
Yeah.
We have common ones.
They vary. They can vary between departments.
Yeah.
Like for me, I'm going on duty, I got to go 1041. If I'm coming off duty, I got to go 1042.
Yeah, 1042 is call your wife where we're from. So I mean,
1021 is are you available for a call? For a phone. We call 38 when we want to meet up face to face. So like everybody's got everything different. I have a cousin who's in Austin PD, and we did cop things. Drank a bottle of Jameson and discussed the differences between our agencies. And we spent probably 6 hours just bullshitting about our different 10 codes. It was hilarious.
Good times.
I was talking to my dad about this because, for a story I was doing, and I was talking about that exact thing, the terminology, how are they calling for these things? And he said, yeah, especially in bigger departments, where they have interaction with other various departments that are all around them, they tend to just use common language.
Yep.
I think that
it-
is the standard of training now.
Yep.
Since 9/11, the 9/11 report and some other things like that, and is that they're trying to get everybody to go to a plain speech.
Yeah.
It's plain
It
talk.
just it prevents confusion. You know what I mean?
It does.
And
Well, point of fact is that like in Wichita and Sedgwick County in general, a 1045 is a traffic stop, but in the rest of Kansas, a traffic stop is a 1044, and it makes no sense. There's no reason for why it's different. It's just different in Sedgwick County and Wichita, and there are like 10-4 is the same across the board. 10-7 is the same across the board. 10-8 is the same across the board.
10-6. I don't know.
All of
10-6
those.
is kind of common
There
too.
are a lot that will line up wherever. So if you're looking to use that kind of terminology, even in a plain speak department, you can go back and forth between the regular like 10-4 or say okay or Roger, a copy, whatever it is. But in my opinion, in space fiction, you're writing it for everybody across all jurisdictions and all places. So your version of 1086 or whatever means nothing to the reader, even if it means something to you. And you could put it in there, but you would need to have a disclaimer or some kind of a dialogue tag that says, this is what that means. And to alleviate that, I always just use plain speech, unless it's something like 10-4 that everybody knows what 10-4 is. And that the other, technical jargon like saying copy or over on the radio or something like that, that's stuff that you could go on a ride along and just listen to how officers talk on the radio.
Pick it up
But the really specific kind of codes and stuff like that, it's confusing for us. If there's a signal or code that's not used very often, like a silent bomb threat, for instance, is like, I don't know, like
you're like looking it up.
You're like, what is that code that she just said? And you're trying to look through the thing,
Those require different responses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 10-4 means free donuts, 100%. 100%.
It does.
Just to kind of circle back on a couple things that you guys were talking about, because I've just been sitting over here being patient.
It's probably a story of which I spoke 10 code at home.
Okay. One thing that I did learn being married to you is, I think it's
patience. I think it's patience is what you learned.
1019.
1019.
1019, yeah.
Their way of saying it was quiet.
It was safe, yeah. Safe,
Without
secure,
saying
no incident of note.
Yeah.
It's the response to a security check, which is 1018 for my agency.
You don't say it. It was quiet.
No, you never say it's quiet.
No, that's bad.
So I have.
Yeah. Especially on a full moon, that's bad juju, man.
I have
sure is quiet out here with no crime.
Why would you say that?
You get one a-hole that'll
Say that
at the
word.
end of his shift. As soon as he's relieved from his post, be like, yeah, on the way back to the station, like, sure is quiet tonight. Next thing you know, sensors are popping off. It's total bedlam.
So
He don't care because he's going off shift, asshole.
I was the family I was raised in. My mom was a nurse. Most of my family was military, and then I had an uncle that was SWAT. So I kind of was raised around all of it, all the different aspects of it. The cops bringing them into the ER, the nurse that's taking care of the crazy, and everything else.
It's like an episode of Law and Order in your house. From the whole thing.
Yeah, and then there's just me.
You were supposed to be the attorney. That's what.
You were supposed to go to law school at UNLV.
I was supposed to be the family priest. You were supposed to be the attorney. That's what.
You make a good priest, LaVoice. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But I noticed that I got my sense of humor from all of them because we were dating during 2020, and he calls me and he's like, "Hey, babe, I don't want you to worry, but they're calling us all to the Coronado Bridge."
Oh yeah, riot control.
For riot control. And I was like, okay, I'll make dinner. I'll see you when you get home. And he's like, you're not freaking out? No, not really. I'm good.
And that's
And
when
so
he
he
knew.
got home and he's like, oh, so they came up, and when they noticed that it was all Border Patrol up there, somebody at the front screamed, it's not SCPD.
Yeah.
It's BP. Turn around, go back.
Yeah.
We don't play.
Yeah.
We showed up with all the good toys. You know.
Yeah, that happened to
And
us.
I
The
just-
troopers showed up. The state troopers showed up when they tried to block off a street, and they didn't want to play with the troopers because they're a little not as soft, I guess.
We have a rep. Yeah, there's certain agencies that just have a reputation of being a little heavy-handed. I mean, it's all within policy. It's all legal, but like the tactics are.
Fear of the unknown too is probably a big part of it.
Yeah, they're.
You see your neighborhood cop every
guys to
day.
do-
It's just your neighborhood cop, but you see the feds show up. You're like, oh God, we're in big trouble.
Yeah, and we're like the redneck version of any type of federal law enforcement. You know, people think feds, they think FBI, they're in suits, ATF, you know, DEA, stuff like that. And then there's just a bunch of us country boys, you know, just waiting to whoop ass. Like,
I worked with a guy at the Germantown Street Department who was ex-Border Patrol. Can confirm. Redneck version of all law enforcement at the federal level.
yeah, and it's not even a race thing. I mean, there's like Hispanic rednecks, they call them chuntaros, and I work with a lot of them, and they're like, Orle, let's get done, let's go, you know? And then they start speaking Spanish. I'm like, you know, I don't speak the language. They're like, but you're an agent. I'm like, yeah, barely. I don't speak the language. You know, I spoke it in Texas. I come over here, everybody speaks English, you know? San Diego, weird. But yeah, there was 100 of them coming up on that bridge, and we're just like, I think the fear hit their eyes when we all looked excited. They're like, oh, hell yeah, come on up.
Have you seen that picture from the riots that happened? I think it was like 2021, and it's this line of riot cops, and then this one guy looks like he's the boss riot cop who's like,
oh, the big giant dude,
the
he's
big
extending his TSB.
yeah.
Yes.
The big smile on his face. I'd have turned around if I was those guys. I'm like, nope.
Yeah,
I'm
Sven
done.
took his pre-workout and didn't get to work out, so he was pissed.
He's going to body press you.
Just ask Nick what toy they handed him.
Oh, they gave me the thumper, man.
Oh, nice.
What's the
street
thumper?
sweeper. It's a semi-automatic grenade launcher filled with 40 mic rounds. So it's got a big tube, and that thing just
So you're allowed
looks
to shoot
intimidating.
grenades at the people? That sounds uncoply.
It was
They're
smoke
so
and
fun.
CS. I had it mixed in there because you got to mix the smoke with the CS because it takes the oxygen out of the air.
It
So,
carries
and then-
it. A lot of times they'll run from the smoke because they think
It
it's
is
gas.
beautiful. Yeah.
So not the kind of grenades I was thinking about. Got it.
No, it's not HEDP like we used to. It's non-lethal.
I don't know if you're doing some foam rounds and stuff. Those are always have a good
Yeah.
response too.
Some kinetic rounds. Yeah.
Yep.
It's good stuff.
So speaking
Now
of,
It's a very violent version of Nerf, that foam round.
Yeah, you don't want to be nerfed.
Yeah, you don't want to be nerfed. It sucks.
if you want to get the vibe though of that kind of stuff, when they were talking earlier, for instance, about tasing, there's a few funny videos that the military puts out of people going through the taser training when they get shot. And there's a couple where the lady reaches down and grabs the package of the men holding her, and then
and that's lame too, because they just put the wires on them. They didn't have to hit with the barbs. You know?
Yeah.
When I got hit with the barbs,
when I got hit, they couldn't hit everyone, so they had to give some the actual ride, and others they put the clips on, and then others they did just like a contact stun. But I was the first one to go, and the instructor that was doing it, he said, "All right, do you want to know when I'm going to do it?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Okay, I'm going to count to 3." And he goes, 1, 2, and then he got to 3, and I'm standing there waiting, and I'm waiting, and nothing happens. And I go to turn around to look at him, and as soon as I do this, he nabs me with the taser, and I'm just like,
Yep.
The same,
Yeah,
almost a similar thing happened to me because he said taser, 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 and then I'm waiting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, maybe I don't have to get shocked. Maybe this is going to be a good day. Now, my whole time for that, like I prepped for that. I was like, man, wouldn't it be funny if I got tased and I just shit myself? So I gorged out on Mexican food the night prior. I really prepped the
Nice.
environment. And I'm like, when he
Nice.
hits me, I'm going to shit all over the place. It's going to be awesome. You know, I'll have that name around the station of the guy who shit himself being tased. And it didn't happen because everything locks up and I was on my tippy toes.
Oh, it
So
locked.
he goes, taser, taser, taser. Nothing happens. And then all of a sudden I hear the pop and I'm like, I've made an egregious error. I can't believe I volunteered for the shit. Next thing you know, I'm up on my tippy toes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, couldn't make a noise. I was like,
I
that's
got
not the noise I made.
I got
And then
tased. We were testing for our department, and I got tased, and I took the probes, and I got one probe hit me in the upper back, and one probe hit me in the butt cheek. And the wider the spread, the more the
Yep,
ride.
the arc.
Yeah, and so that
More
felt
the
great.
ride.
But the funny part
You
about
rode
my
the
story is
lightning.
I didn't tell my wife about it. I didn't think about it, and I went on about my day because I was at a SWAT training. And then I go home. Well, so she goes to do the laundry, and there's this big bloody red spot in my underwear where the barb went in. And she's like, "What did you do today at work?" Well, let me tell you a funny
Scott,
thing.
I got hit with the same arc. It hit me just below the neck, right on the right shoulder, and
Yeah.
the second barb hit me right in the butt cheek. He had
Yeah.
a beautiful arc.
If you get the
You
whole
know,
arc, there's total lockup.
Yeah,
But
I
when they
rode the
don't work,
lightning
it's
hard
because
that day.
they've got too much clothing on, or you hit them on the run and only got their arm or something. But if both probes hit the flesh, it's involuntary and you're done.
Yeah,
At least for a few
You know,
seconds.
there's an entire TikTok page dedicated to watching people ride the lightning.
Yeah.
it's not fun, but
It's-
I'll take that over OC any day
Oh,
of the
yeah.
week and twice on Sunday.
Because when you're
100%.
done being tased, you're just done.
You're just done.
Yeah,
You don't have to clean
That's-
up. You don't have to wipe yourself
I
off.
had a cramp in my calves for a couple of days because I was doing some ballerina shit on my toes, so my calves weren't used to it. But getting OC spray, getting the devil's piss on your face,
Yeah, you got to wash.
that shit.
One thing, a trope, while we're talking about tropes for people to put in their bag, is my least favorite trope. One of my least, it's got to be my top three, is people getting tased unconscious in thrillers, because
Yeah,
that's
we
not
were
how
just-
it works.
We were just watching Transformers and they hit him with a taser and he's like, and I'm like, that never happens. I'm that guy when I watch movies.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, they don't pass out. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
That's not a response.
You're going to need a better plot device if you need to knock somebody out and drag them away for the
Yeah.
story purposes, because the taser is not going to do it, period.
Like, just hit him with the CSB in the back of the skull because that always works.
Just put a DARPA logo on whatever toy you make up, and you're good because everyone knows DARPA does weird shit.
There you
Hand
go.
wave him. Just
But
use your hand
speaking
wave.
about Transformers, that's a good movie that shows you how it goes from local police to military police to the Super Squirrels. With
Super
S7
Squirrel.
Extenda.
It's FBI. I think you're giving them too much credit because they suck.
But they didn't shoot your
They
dog, so they're
suck.
still above the ATF.
No, yeah, I was about to say that's the ATF.
But you
Yeah.
see how it
DA only shows up, does none of the work that I did for him. They just show up to pick up the drugs. They didn't do any of the enforcement part.
right, but you see how it starts local with the guy going at Sam thinking he's on drugs. And then it just
That
slowly
seems
climbs.
ridiculous. Oh, are you looking at my piece? You
Of
want to go
ATF,
50
though,
cent?
ATF and tasers. I think my favorite video from last year was where the ATF agent got tased by local cops because when he came to knock on this guy's door and ask him about some part that he bought for a firearm, the guy, there's some guy at my front door claiming to be the ATF. Can you guys come pick him up? And the cops would not take any crap from this guy. He was like, I'm a federal effing agent. And it was like, get on the ground. And he was like, I'm a federal. It was great. Oh, it was so
And that's funny amongst all the federal law enforcement agencies. I mean, you got Border Patrol. Like when we talk to local agencies, they're like, we get no static. We get no resistance from them. They're like, all right, yeah, whatever you guys need, we'll help you.
Guns here.
We want the drug bust, And I'm like, okay. In Texas, it was great because you'd have DPS, the their state troopers, would love to get in a stack with us when we were raiding a stash house or whatever, because they know that they're going to get bodies, they're going to get drugs, and it's not like I have a buddy who's up at Yolo County Sheriff's Department. And he sent me a picture. He's like, "Hey man, check out this drug bust, all this pot." And I'm like, "Yeah, I remember my first drug bust." And I sent him a picture from my first one where I'm sitting on a literal throne of marijuana, 1,500 pounds. We built a throne out of it, and I took pictures. And he's like, "You're a dick," and I'm like, "No, it's Nick. Everybody gets that wrong." But yeah.
So that actually brings up another point, because you mentioned that the ATF agent getting tased by the local cops, and that made me think in North Carolina there was an incident where two different jurisdictions were running a sting operation. So one was actually thinking they were selling the drugs, and the other was buying the drugs to get the dealer. Turned out both were cops, and they show up at the bus house, and it's like, "No, you put your guns down. No, you put your guns down." And it makes
a Spider-Man meme.
Yeah, it was a Spider-Man meme, except it was real on the taxpayer dollars. But that aside,
you'd be shocked how often that happens, JR. That happens quite a bit. It doesn't always make the news, though.
They're supposed to do deconfliction now, and there's a bunch of different services, but people do it better than others.
Well, the reason I mentioned that is that makes you realize that one thing to think about if you're talking about something as vast as space is you have to understand the concept of jurisdiction so you can make that work, because you're not going to have one cop who's in charge of all space, right? Like he might have a galaxy or a solar, whatever, but it's not going to be just everything. And so that is the tension in a story where you talk about budding jurisdiction.
You've seen that in the pages of Green Lantern, who's a space cop.
Okay, go on.
He's a space cop. So, I mean, you have the Green Lanterns, and they'll have their laws that also have to deconflict with that planetary source's laws. And if it gets even further into like territories in that, on that planet. So they go in there, and sometimes the locals turn against them. Sometimes there's a higher authority that comes from OA, and just where I'm going to get geeky because I love comic books, and you have to send another lantern over there, or a lantern from another corps, because there's different colored lanterns out there.
Do you see First Flight? It was a DC animated. That's one of the best examples when Sinestro's taking Hal Jordan out for his first run, and they go and they try to track down an informant, and Sinestro showing him the ropes of how they deal with informants and stuff. Oh, this is perfect. This is space coppery right here.
That was probably one of the best animated buddy cop movies, short of Lethal Weapon.
This is why I'm excited about the Green Lantern TV show that they keep talking about putting out, but they haven't yet, is that it's supposed to be like the veteran, like John Stewart, training a young rookie like Guy Gardner or somebody, and it's supposed to be buddy cop. And
I'm not watching it. Kilowog's not in it. Kilowog is the best. I'm not watching it if Kilowog's not in it.
Kilowog has to be in it.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to talk about off of what Scott said about the deconfliction aspect of things is, did you guys see that thumbs up, or was it just me?
No, I saw
it. Okay, good.
It was just me.
I saw it. It was me too. I just thought maybe I had too much to drink.
Can I make it happen again? No? Okay.
That was awesome.
But, we do try to deconflict a lot, especially when you're talking about like state and government, federal agencies, or even city. But like I can think of one particular call where the FBI was chasing somebody, and they were having a car chase in Wichita and didn't tell anybody they were having a car chase in Wichita, and nobody knew. And the only reason we did find out was because they ended up getting in a shootout with the guy in front of his house, and the guy got away, and the feds just left. And like we responded to the shooting, and there was no one there. The feds didn't.
They do. They've done that several times.
They just vanished, and we have to investigate the shooting, but the feds have no. They don't have any anything to. They don't have to answer our questions. They don't have to cooperate in any investigation that we do.
They're famous for just picking up their shell casings and leaving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you have to.
That happens in California all the time.
Yeah, you can play a lot about with jurisdictional type things. When you write simple things like writing a speeding ticket, if you're sitting on the border of your city or the county or another city or whatever, and you happen to catch the violation, but technically speaking, it happened in the other county or it didn't happen in your city, and you write them a ticket, that's going to get thrown out because of the jurisdiction issues. So it is a big part of cop work, jurisdiction, but I think in space fiction it becomes more fluid than anything, just because you have a lot of area that you're playing with.
In most organizations, at least if you're comparing them to, like, we always love the feds. The thing is nobody ever, if the feds come and say, we're taking over this case, locals will be like, thank God, take that case. That's expensive. It's going to cost
100%.
We don't want that case.
Yeah.
Why would we want that case? Take it.
So
Yeah.
this is brings home the idea that this panel has more room to go. I had more questions that we didn't get to talk about, which is a good sign. So I think we're going to schedule a second panel at some point in the future, but we're an hour and a half in. I promised Scott I'd keep us on time because he had a long day and
I get
tired.
I've been insomnia.
He gets up early to do the whole working out thing before the sun. It's weird. I don't know what that's about. I don't do that anymore. I'm a civilian. I wait till noon to work out like a civilized human being. But if you have
It's
more,
a special ops thing, JR. You wouldn't understand.
Like
Yeah, I
I
wasn't
said the other
special
day,
squirrel. I
I'll
was
do a
supposed to-
push-up if I accidentally fall up the stairs.
but we definitely have more to cover. So if you have questions for us when we get the band back together again, drop them in the comment section, and I will add it to the outline for episode 2 because I think we're going to do one. We also want to cover urban fantasy because that is sci-fi. Well, that is speculative fiction, sci-fi, and I think it's almost its own thing, deserving of its own panel as
Dragon
well.
badge.
Yeah,
Badge.
and fantasy would be a good one as well. But with that being said, we do need to end somewhere, so we're going to end it here. And I'm going to go around round robin, top to bottom, and I'm going to let everyone remind everyone who they are and where they can find them, and if they're writing anything at the moment, tell us about it real quick. So, Steve, you first.
Unmute button. Yeah. So you can find me at authorstevediamond.com, or the Writer Dojo. You can always find me and Larry Curry over there gabbing about nonsense. As far as what I'm writing right now, I mean, I write. I'm trying to always write something. Right now, it's last book in a supernatural thriller series, the sequel to Servants of War, and then after that, it's the 3 books for Aethon. It's giant mechs and alien in space. So so I'm always doing that. Now, I did just have a cop story come out. It was it's basically urban fantasy detective stuff, supernatural Bosch, and that story just came out in a Baen anthology called Down These Mean Streets.
Nice.
So and that'll, when you read it, pretty much everything I just said will make a whole lot of sense as to why I like what I like. But that's me. And look, I mean, I'm always fun. I'm always good to talk about this stuff, especially with this group of folks right here. All good folks. So
And
good being with y'all.
Since you said people only invite you to horror panels and obviously now
True.
cop panels,
True.
I'm going to find the exact opposite. Like, I don't know, Sparkle Bunny Fairies or something, a panel like that I can get you on just because I want to give you like the polar opposite.
That's the Writer Dojo joke. We mentioned like Sparkle Princess, and I'm like, they're like, Steve, you can't write that. I'm like, well, if I did, how I would do it, it would be Sparkle Murder Princess. And so now everybody wants me to write that story, and I'm like, okay. Twist.
I might not have stolen the joke from them, hypothetically.
Yeah.
But all right, Scott, can you remind people who you are, where they can find you, and what you're working on?
My name's Scott Moon. I have a webpage, scottmoonwriter.com, where you can look at all my books. Currently, I'm working on a series called Homeworld Lost. The 8th book in that series will come out in February 4th, I believe. If you want cop space stuff, I've written 2 cop space series, Dark Landing, which is kind of a space western sheriff type thing, and Galactic Shield, which is a 4-book series with some space cops in it, which I personally think is probably the best thing I've ever written. And it's not my most popular, but I got my fans of it, and I would love for people to check it out and let me know what they think.
And the Dark Landing one, the cool thing I liked about that is if you look at it, still up there on the Keystroke Medium website, where him and Josh like outlined it on air live with feedback, which made
That
it
was
even
fun.
weirder because they were like partly doing the episode and partly responding to people making weird suggestions that just, and that interactive nature of it was hilarious. In fact, because of that episode, I actually suggested we do that one for Nick and make him draw it based on what everyone was saying in the episode as a live
Nice.
thing. He has not said yes to that yet, and he's still muted, so he's probably cussing me out, but you don't hear it.
No, that I've done that at panels. People throw out suggestions, and I'll create something. It's probably one of my most successful panels. It started with 10, and then word got out that I was taking suggestions from the audience and making a character. And actually, I think by the time it ended, there was like 50 people, and I had them all sign it when I was done.
Nice.
So it's been decided, and we will let Scott and Josh be on the other end of the shenanigans that time to throw weirdness at you. You might regret this, but
Now, okay, since the stroke, I mean, yeah, I have use of my right side, just like I prayed for in Iraq. Should I get, hurt, as long as my eyes and my right arm and hand work, I'm good to go. I can live a fruitful life, in my opinion. It's just slower now. The signals from the brain take a little bit longer to get to the hand, but it can be done.
It can move.
Outstanding. All right, Josh, who are you? Where can they find you, and what are you writing?
Well, I'm Josh. Hi. I tried to do the thumbs up thing, and it's not working. I'm fairly confident that my website is down right now because I haven't paid the subscription, but I'm very, very rarely. I don't update it very often. But Facebook, you could find me. Twitter, I'm the Josh Hayes. Facebook is probably the easiest way to find me. I just finished the very first book I ever wrote when I first started taking this seriously, which is a science fiction riff on Peter Pan. That'll be out sometime this year on audio only, and I'm working on a series called Weaponized, which is a kind of a mix of spy and special operations military in the future, and that should be out this year as well.
Yeah,
My favorite series is the Valor series. If you're interested in the investigation aspect, some of the stuff that I've talked about, I wrote the Valor trilogy. The first book of which it's an investigator that is trying to figure out why a mission went wrong, and it's told from his perspective primarily. But as he interviews the survivors, it goes into kind of a first-person, unreliable narrator, and they're lying, and he's got to figure out why they're lying. It's pretty interesting. I like it.
It's great.
Very Courage Under Fire, but in space with Valor.
100%.
Yeah, I dig it. It was a good one. All right, next we got Mr. Michael LaVoice. Who are you? What are you writing, and where can they find you?
Who am I? Still trying to answer that one. What I'm writing currently is a series called Gladius Leagues. I'm on book 1 of that called Any Given Doomsday. This takes place in a future where humanity has spread to the stars, and we have done so because we stopped fighting wars. We use warfare by proxy through a combat sport called Gladius Leagues, and then all of a sudden, we don't even have standing armies and navies anymore. And then all of a sudden, we get attacked by aliens out on the rim, and we don't know how to handle this. So we send a bunch of prima donna warrior athletes in to deal with it. They're kind of like a mix between the NFL and the WWE. So it's a lot of fun to write so far.
That sounds like
all right. Jenny, Miss J.F. Posthumous. Can you remind people who you are, where they can find you, and what you're working on?
You can find me at author JF Posthumous on Facebook, or if you go to the Three Ravens Discord, you can find me there. And I'm on Amazon under JF Posthumous. I am currently waiting on edits for the first novel in the Injustice series called Scales of Injustice. It's basically a homicide detective who gets embroiled in problems with her department. She discovers there's dirty cops, and when she goes to talk to the chief of police, she's found over his dead body. So she has to prove her innocence while they're trying to catch her.
Nice.
The plot thickens.
So Jenny has a problem where she doesn't sleep like a normal person. So she has more books than they have editors over at Three Ravens. So
I actually have.
They need to order more editors.
I have 6 in the series written. The prequel is technically it's titled Hidden Motives. It's the first contact between the Calasians and humans. That will be out by spring. It is not a police procedural, but it's fun. I hope people will like it. And I have multiple urban fantasies that are available and a lot of anthologies that are available. I'm currently not writing because words will not come because of what happened in June. And if anyone wants to know about that, it is on my Facebook page. Just go look at June. It's public. So yeah, there you go.
And since Nick, you got to be a panelist this time and not just the host, like you're like
nice.
Hair Club for Men, like you're not just the president, you're the user kind of thing. But can you remind people of where they can find you, what you're writing?
Oh my lord! If you're a fan of comic books, the visual medium, you're going to find me. Personally, you're going to find me on all the socials at Nick Garber Art. And then if you want to look up my comic book, which there's many titles and it's all 90s style goodness, you can find me at AppG Comics on all the social media stuff. So, and what I'm currently writing, I'm not doing any writing right now. I'm doing editing and art approval for our Speedster, our Quickwire. Yeah, sorry, brain trauma. But so working on that. That's going to be released later in 2024. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. Is I'm quarterbacking a lot of stuff as far as the comic production stuff.
And I just want you to know, dear listener, dear viewer, that I did send in my art, but apparently my stick figures were not up to snuff. So I got rejected. You
were absolutely not getting hired for the job. I'm going to steal your story. I mean,
but
I'm not going to steal it. I'm going to pay you for it. But the artwork, I couldn't. I had to find someone more better.
There you go.
He did coffee and canned foods.
Well, that's what he paid me for as an artist. I'm going to pay him with also coffee and kind words.
Speaking of coffee, we are affiliate sponsored by Coffee Brand Coffee. So use the link in the show notes. Podcast Grunts is the code to get 10% off. You're helping an American business make American addictions. I mean, coffee, it's good. It's great. We love all of it. That is where I get my gourmet coffee. I mean, I still do the crappy Folgers in a pinch, but you are keeping us supplied in at one episode at a time as you feed your addiction, and we greatly appreciate it. This is the part of the interview, dear listener, dear viewer, where I remind you, please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books. So do your part. And if you get the 2,000th review on a product, I hear that Amazon will send them unicorn steaks, and I need to know how they're going to eat them. So, I mean, we need to make this happen. So, we have room. We should do a steaks in space and like what you could turn into steaks as an episode, just so we could talk about steak. I know Steve is down. I actually heard about this idea when I was in college, and there was the College of Cardinals actually had the theological discussion of when a creature you find in space is a space cow so we can eat it, and when it's a sentient creature of God's covenant and it's your brother, and like where you draw the line. And it made me wonder about space steaks. So, I mean, this has got to be a thing. So
if it's a space sirloin, I'm eating it. I don't care the connection.
But Steve will smoke.
Don't ask questions, just eat.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. And you can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the Twitters, our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com for serious business inquiries only. We have a Facebook group for Blasters and Blades and a Facebook page. We're going to have to make a new one because I think we lost control of the first one. And most importantly, we have Madam Stabby Stab on Instagram, Twitter, and email for all of your hate messages. Please send them to her. She wants to see them so she can reply and make you cry. All bets are off. If you write, buyer beware, right? It's on you. We warned you. And with that being said, you can find us on our website at anchor.fm/blasterstack and tack blades. Again, anchor.fm/blasterstack and tack blades, where for as little as 99 cents a month, you can help keep the lights on. Every penny helps. These episodes aren't free to produce, and we appreciate your contributing to keeping the lights on. Or you can support the show more directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink until coffee pours out of their ears, and they'll drink that too, because reasons. All right. With that being said, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Seriously, everyone, thank you for coming on. I mean it. We'll book a second panel. I think we've got more room to talk. Definitely going to have to book that Space Steak episode. Steve, you're totally invited. And Jenny, again, on air, we thank you for our new graphic logo. We much appreciate it. We love it very much. So well done. And with that, we are out. Wait for it.